all we do on this show for the last year is talk about AI and the future, but something odd's happening in America, right? We're forging ahead into this world of AI. Super intelligent robots are going to do everything. We'll have the answer to everything at our fingertips, but we're also digging in deeper, even deeper into the sort of realm of feelings, ruling decisions rather than rules of logic. The left now circling the wagons around Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Wall Street, and on Wall Street, by the way, many of them are doing the same thing. When you hear talk about the independence of the Federal Reserve, a lot of that's just circling the wagons around Jay Powell, who, by the way, in my opinion, seems to be allowing his personal feelings toward Trump to hurt his job and tarnish his legacy. You can see those two champing at the bit, ready to go. Co-host of Big Money Show, Taylor Riggs, along with Fox Nation host David Webb. So let's just start with the Supreme Court thing, right? I mean, golly, it's one thing when a fellow justice sort of comes at you, right? Because I don't know how usual it is. You're the lawyer in the group. But now when a fellow liberal justice says, hey, you may not know the law, but then we're hearing from Justice Jackson that it doesn't matter. She's speaking from the heart. She's speaking from experience. And that's how she's going to decide these cases.
Really interesting thoughts, and I'll let you weigh in. I think one of my favorites is in one case, she said, with Roe v. Wade, when they overturned that, well, if you don't like, you can't, it's too much of a hardship to move states. So how dare you take away the right for an abortion? But then in the latest birthright citizenship case, I believe it was, or no, the LGBTQ case on the book, she said, well, if you don't like the school, you can just move states.
Right.
You can't have it both ways. And I think that's why people are really just so frustrated with, they feel like the whole system has been really politicized. So I think it's sad. I wish it wasn't like this.
And David, we're seeing this also now, even more so with these judges, you know, who seem to have the same power as the executive branch these days.
Well, look, the qualifications of the Supreme Court don't necessarily mean you have to be a lawyer or a judge, but you do have to have some level of jurisprudence. The fact is, Ketanji Brown Jackson was a diversity hire by Joe Biden, who was a justice equivalent of Kamala Harris. She doesn't carry the legal fortitude or willingness to engage. Remember Amy Coney Barrett's response to her that she would argue for an imperial judiciary while railing against an imperial presidency. And that's activism. The court used to have what's called the greater good argument, which I never believed in, regardless of which side it falls on. It's supposed to be based on law, interpretation of law, and the Constitution as applies. That's the role of the court. Problem is, activist judges, in this case, someone who's not qualified to be on the court, is exactly that. So she's incapable of separating herself like a Justice Kennedy used to do. What was Justice Kennedy known for? Being that independent voice that would assess whether you agreed or disagreed. He had a logic and a process.
Real quick on Powell, it's sort of the same kind of thing, right? In this case, you have the New York Times writing this article, sort of defending the actions. And a lot of folks on the street are saying, well, they're circling the wagons and not directly protecting Powell, but saying protecting the independence of the Fed. We got to have an independent Fed. But almost every day, more and more people are saying rates should be cut.
And a lot of people think that the Fed was not independent because they did a jumbo rate cut 2 weeks before the election. So now that we're trying to claim independence, people are really frustrated. Look, I come down on both sides of this. To me, it's really hard to cut interest rates when stocks are at record highs. But on the other hand, Larry Kudlow always points out inflation is lower now than it was when they did the jumbo rate cut. So cut rates to help people on the ground.
And by the way, the stock market's not the economy. Spain's got the #1 stock market in the world and the #2 unemployment in the world. So,
Yeah, well,
I wanted you guys, I don't know if you guys saw this, right? A town in France called Roubaix. And it's about 40% Muslim city. And immigration's gotten out of control. But this is a big giant mural they put up to celebrate our 4th of July. And the reason I bring it up, first of all, this town, they did a survey of all the newspapers out there, about 20,000 towns in France, based on 20,000 crimes. And this was the city that came in last. So it's extraordinarily violent. But they were talking about our immigration policy. David, today in Gallup, or Pew, I always mix them with Gallup, says that there's a big swing back now on immigration. And people are saying we should go softer. That 30% of people say migration, they want migration decreased from, just only 55%. A record high 79% consider immigration good for the country. A lot less support for the border wall and mass deportation. I do think we conflate legal and illegal migration, but still, deliberately, but still, what do you make of how rapidly that's shifting?
Not surprising. First of all, if you do sentiment polls, that shifts over time from top of news to worn out after time in the news. I prefer issue-based polling. If you poll people on issues related to illegal immigration, to safety, just like if you poll them on economics, their economics, how they're doing, sentiment is different than policy. And as for the town in France, if you want to have Lady Liberty covering her eyes, then don't want her to open her eyes and her arms to you to come to America. The further away you get from America, the greater America becomes. And that's something written by a friend of yours and mine, Michael Reagan, who just did an overseas trip and wrote that article.
Right.
And we talked about it on radio. The view from the outside, I've been to France numerous times. People look at America as a beacon. Only those with an agenda see otherwise, or in this case, cover up the eyes with their virtue signaling.
Name one cool company that France has developed in the last 100 years. They don't do it.
I got something for you. Okay, we always talk about the young adults and the sort of crisis, this young adult crisis, and two things caught my eye. I read this late last week, early this week. 1.4 American women are OnlyFans. Of that number, 1.2 million are between ages of 18 and 24. That's 10% of American women in that age bracket. And on top of that, we've got this hit show, Love Island. You know, what's going on? I mean, is that a reflection of society? Is it a reflection of the economy? I mean, you know, you hear it's easy. What is it?
Yeah, I think society is diverging, though, because, again, we just had this election on Trump. And yes, you could argue it was economic, inflation, policy, immigration, but I also think it was a pushback against all the crap that in public schools they're shoving in our face. So I think the left, they're doing pole stripping for the Olympics, or, you know, you make it up. But I do think that there is a divergence going on where there are normal conservative moms like me who are saying, I don't have a TV in my home because I don't want this around my daughter. She doesn't get an iPad. She doesn't get screen time. So I think there is sort of that more liberalization, but I also have so much confidence in moms like me who are pushing back and saying, no, I reject that. I'm not doing that OnlyFans. That's not on me.
David?
Look, there's been a growth in alternatives in education for a reason. It's a reflection of a cultural demand. To your point about the election, it was American culture, and yes, with our differences and our different opinions, pushing back against forced opinion or having to either get on bended knee to an opinion or otherwise. Whether it's young people, and this is a tragic number because out of that percentage, how many of them will really become, quote, OnlyFans stars and make $1 million?
Right.
It's also a dangerous reflection of how socialization can become normalization in society rather than an understanding of what you're really facing when you're on social media.
All right, well, we're out of time, but I will leave on a good note, folks, a happy note. TSA changed their rules.
Yes. I fly enough.
And we don't have to take off our shoes anymore. I think I found something we all could agree on.
Yes.
If you find one person who doesn't like this one, let me know. Let me know.
I don't want my socks on them nasty floors anywhere.
All right, David, Taylor, thank you both so much.